All right. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, as it may be, everyone. And welcome to the February 14th Gateway API Gamma meeting.
And happy Valentine's Day. Well,
And happy Valentine's Day for those who celebrate. All right. I will share my screen and we will kick off with a recap of what we went over last meeting. All right. I'm going to assume folks can see this. Yeah, so last meeting, we spent most time going over the milestone for Gamma and working on getting tasks assigned and just kind of trying to burn down what do we have left that we want to do before the Gateway API 07 release. And the intent of that release is to submit Gamma for its first formal API review from SIG Network reviewers. It's had an informational only review previously during the 060 release, but this would be kind of like the next step of that of we want to formally publish Gamma as part of Gateway API in the experimental channel. So yeah, this is where we're at with Milestone. We've got a lot of the big stuff in. We've had substantial expansion of scope of the routing stuff to include consumer routing. So service owner producer routing was kind of like the initial gap that Gamma started adopting first. And then John authored gap that added a substantial expansion of scope to include how to write routes as a consumer of services rather than just as an owner. And that also removed a few restrictions in the initial gap around cross namespace routing and where backends can be. So yeah, definitely take a look at the updated gap and the changes that have emerged there. Those changes were in, I guess the PR is not tracked in there, but I'll add it to the notes. All right, then the other kind of like remaining tasks is mostly around conformance. So we want to write up a test plan basically for how we want to test Gamma conformance. And we're not going to have the entire conformance suite as part of this, but we'll at least have a documented plan of how we intend to approach it. We've discussed previously having similar need for conformance profiles for L4 for North-South Gateway API ingress. So we're going to propose a similar approach for mesh purposes. And yeah, I think the last thing on there was how gateways should or should not interact with Gamma routing configuration. We have a draft gap on that probably needs to be revisited and summarized. I think Flynn and I were going to try to find some time to work on that.
We should probably put that on the calendar at some point since we did such a great job of having that happen over the last couple of weeks. let me pin you on that after this.
Yep, that sounds good. We'll do that. All right. Yeah, so that's kind of like the state of we're trying to wrap things up as we get closer to that. And we went over EMEA friendly meeting times for the main Gateway API meetings. So we've had pretty good success with having attendance at both this time and the 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. West Coast time. on alternating weeks. So it sounds like Gateway API is going to attempt to do something similar. And I think Shane wants to talk about that later in the agenda. And yeah, and last topic was about KubeCon. Hopefully we'll try to get some folks here, specifically at folks who are able to attend this meeting. I'm assuming will be more likely to be present at KubeCon EU. So yeah, we would love to schedule some time for Gateway API maintainers and folks who are interested in contributing more and implementers to yeah, get to know each other. And yeah, I think Rob, if you got anything more to say about that.
Yeah, I can add a couple notes. If you're able to make it to KubeCon, obviously we love to meet up. There is the Contributor Summit, which I think this time is the Tuesday before the rest of the conference starts. So usually the requirement, I think that's the same this time, is to be a Kubernetes SIGs or Kubernetes org member on GitHub. If you've been active, contributing in any way to this this project, we can help get you there. So I've always found Contributor Summit very, very helpful. And last year, some of us were able to meet up, just kind of an informal working session of sorts in person. Again, it's hard to predict attendance this year, but if anyone is able to make it, it would be great to have kind of a small in-person working session as well. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Yeah.
Should we, I don't remember exactly how the Contributor Summit works. Should we go ahead and actually put something on the calendar, preferably in the afternoon, so I can be there? Because wow, I'm being very articulate today. Sorry, everyone. Clearly, I need more coffee. But last time in Detroit, one of the other things was that a group of us were talking about meeting up, and it ended up finally happening on the last day of the conference after half of us had flown home. So perhaps putting something actually on the calendar ahead of time might help make that go a little bit better.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Don't get me wrong, the people that we got to meet at the end there, that was very nice. But yeah, there were a lot of us who weren't there.
Yeah, that's entirely correct. We had some meetings on Contrib Summit Day, and then we had more informal meetings with one like Friday afternoon after everyone had
like 4
Friday
PM
afternoon
or
people
something.
had just left. So it was but yeah, that would be really helpful. I agree. Maybe even just I think one of the most helpful things would be getting a list of people who think they'll be around. So far I haven't gotten too many responses, but if we can get that list somewhere, maybe mention in Slack or something. I don't think there's going to be, maybe I'll send a message in Slack and people can respond there, because I don't know.
That seems simplest. For the record, I expect to be there.
Great.
I assume you expect to be there as well, Rob.
Yes, nothing is for certain, but I did get formal approval yesterday, so I plan to be there.
Excellent.
Oh, awesome, Mate. Cool.
Mate will be there. John will be there. Nice. Mike well, I'm looking at Mike Morris, although I just realized Mike Beaumont is also on the call.
I'll be there. I'll be there as well. Yep. All right. Yeah, so Shane, did you want to briefly talk about the Gateway API new meeting time?
Yeah, sure. Super brief. I got the Monday, March 6th meeting of regular Gateway API moved from its usual 3 p.m. Pacific to 9 a.m. Pacific. We're doing a trial run of this to see what turnout is like. I know that this meeting time is a lot better for people East Coast, Brazil, EU, and so forth. So if you're interested in going to the regular Gateway API meetings, but the timing has been prohibitive in the past, please try to make it to that one and show your support. And then if the turnout is really good and we see that we need to be doing that on the reg, we will.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry about the meeting conflicts. It does, but just if you don't make it to this one, it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't try a couple more, but I get the impression we're gonna have pretty good turnout for it either way, so. Just, yeah, just, even just saying you're adding your support if you're not gonna be there, like put your name on the meeting notes and saying like, I couldn't be here, but I really want this time, that's fine too.
Sounds good. Thanks for making that happen. Dave, this is enough topic on the agenda. Can we document Gamma better on the Gateway API website, probably referencing the Gamma gaps?
I'm
Yeah,
actually
you're
the
talking
one.
about stuff on for V7. I thought this would be useful. Because technically, when you Google search on Gamma on the website, it goes to the contributing, and then it doesn't link back to the service mesh gap.
I think that sounds like
And
a
I
really
don't
good
know.
idea.
And you're doing the API review, and I don't know what the API is. So I figure it's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. Rob, thoughts?
I completely agree. I forgot how lacking our documentation is for this. Yeah, this is one of those things where if you didn't know any better, you you would think we hadn't done anything, because this documentation is the same as it was when we first started the working group. Maybe what we could do, I don't want to commit to too much, but if you look at the website right now, we have a few tabs, and I think we have room for, say, a Gamma tab. I think Gamma is a sufficient enough initiative that it could have its own tab, and we can certainly reference, if you look in our reference docs right now, we have a list of GEPs. We could have the same GEPs listed, but just in the context of Gamma. So anything that touched Gamma could be under the Gamma tab as well. I don't know, just ideas, but I entirely agree with the initiative.
Yeah,
Even that first overview page, it feels like there should be room in the body of that text to, by the way, if you're thinking about this in the context of meshes.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that we haven't had this yet is because when we first started this, it was very much exploratory, and it wasn't something we felt necessarily ready to commit to, but it feels like we're approaching a point where this is a thing that we want to do, and we want to make it known and yeah, get more folks involved. So definitely appreciate the feedback. Yeah, so that's the end of our agenda today. I'm happy to open it up if there are other topics that folks want to talk about. And then I can also go back to the chat and see if there was one or two things that folks mentioned. But Shane, I'll turn it over to you for a minute.
Yeah, last week we talked about seeing if we could find somebody other than the usual suspects to work on the conformance test plan, and Michael Beaumont was nice enough to jump in for that. Thank you, Michael. He's on here. So if you do need any help, Michael, reach out to any of these guys. Reach out to us in the Kubernetes Slack and stuff like that, and let us know. You won't be alone in trying to come up with it. But thank you for jumping on it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just link back to chat. Derek was a +1 on adding more high-level content on Gamma. We have a lot of specific implementation details in the GEPs, but getting it surfaced more visibly would be good. John was asking if anybody got a Gamma or close talk approved for KubeCon EU. I'm going to be on a panel with Rob, Laura from Sig Multicluster, and who's Stephen Kitt, I believe, also from SIG Multicluster, talk about the intersection of Gateway API and MCS. I anticipate trying to mention and talk about Gamma in that context some. But yeah, would love to hear if anybody else anticipates or is aware of Gamma related talks that have been accepted.
Not I.
I know of some that got rejected, which is not
Yes.
terribly useful.
Yeah, I know there were some really good talk proposals that didn't make it in, but I think by my count, we have 7 Gateway API talks in this KubeCon,
Oh
which
my
is a bit
God.
more than more than Detroit, which was already a lot. So yeah, and John, yes, yours is very Gamma. Well, it seems very Gamma focused. You got a rough time though. I've got to say.
What is your talk, John?
It's about like sidecars and not sidecars, but it's it's the last talk on Friday.
You're saying I should definitely drop by that, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
If
if anyone's scheduling travel, it's a good reason to not leave on Friday afternoon, because John's talk is very much last thing on Friday, but it should be a great one. I think it's John and Keith. Yeah.
Man, I feel for you. That is a rough slot. Oh my God.
All right. Well, it looks like most of their talk and chat was just about meeting times and EU friendly times being desirable. Yeah, I'll pause a minute and open the floor if there's any other topics that folks are interested in talking about during this time, and if not, we can wrap up a little bit early.
Yeah, this is the one here. I do have one question. I'm just curious, any discussion on the target of the HTTP route, these things? Has this kind of thing come up before, how people normally do it? And today, let's say, if we map to look at any ALB or, NLB, will, on AWS, you always have the concept, you can always health check the target. We have a health check fleet to check the health check target, and you can configure the health check protocol. I'm just curious if we map the HTTP route to those, and with the endpoint group, where does health check? I mean, has this conversation ever come up?
Yeah, I think it's probably most similar to what we're doing on GKE, because we have a similar thing where our load balancer health checks are not the same thing as Kubernetes health checks, at least today. And so what we've done is we've created a policy for that. It's a health check policy, and it just enables, it maps pretty closely to what can be configured with cloud APIs. We're just allowing it to be configured with GCP APIs and attached to one of our gateways.
Okay, so basically, it's kind of policy applied to all HTTP route attached to the same gateway. You cannot have different kind of health check to different route to say, hey, this one we're going to go to this port, or the other one will go to HTTPS, or
yeah, that's a good point. I think actually where we've attached it is per backend. So attaching it to service, but I'd have to double check on where we've attached it. But it attaches at one level only. It doesn't support any kind of hierarchical, defaulting or anything. And it basically, it maps very closely to our cloud APIs. So wherever you would attach a health check using those APIs is largely where we've added our health check policy.
Okay, Okay, got it. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I think that's an interesting discussion because we don't have anything really like documented or written about that anywhere in terms of health checks with Gateway. Yeah, so I would be interested in hearing more from implementers about how you're working that problem, but that seems fine if it is out of the scope of what should be within the spec.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, we or at least I had thought that custom health check configuration is something that would really benefit cloud providers, but maybe not as clear benefit for in-cluster providers. But maybe I've missed that, and it's more broadly useful. And if it is, maybe we should consider something that's more generic and built in. I know we had earlier discussions a year plus ago about some kind of standardized health checking. And that was, you know, in addition to timeouts, we looked at, is there a standardized way of health checking that, you know, lots of implementations can support? And there was more variation than I would have liked. It's one of those things where I think there was a common core, and then there were, you know, all these add-on little bits that were hard to represent. I'm not sure what that looks like, but certainly interested in, you know, if there's more implementations out there that would benefit, should bring it up.
Yeah, I think the confusion I had, you know, is because Kubernetes also have a kubelet also health check the pod. I mean, how much overlapping between this? So my question is it good enough? Say, for example, if you have HTTP route, if the health check free, just check if I can establish TCP three-way handshake with a pod, I will consider it healthy and let the Kubernetes health check the liveness, deep health check the pod. Just have these two things together. Would that be good enough?
That's
Yeah,
gonna
I mean,
get even more interesting with H3, right?
Yeah.
So today, you know, yeah, and if you have a HTTP route and you have you know, gRPC, the OTCP boost, and UDP, once we get to UDP, we do.
Yeah, I think, or go ahead, Flynn.
No, go ahead. I'll jump in after.
Cool. No, I think the ultimate source of truth would be the pod's readiness, like you're describing. Like, ideally, we should just read the information that Kubernetes health checks are already providing us and work with that. I recognize that's not always possible, but that feels ideal. I know there are some implementations like, you know, GK's old Ingress implementation. We tried to derive a custom health check by default by reading the Kubernetes readiness probe configuration. That was a very painful thing to do, because if that configuration changes, what do we do? And so we just didn't do anything. You know, it's tough to get it right. Other things in progress, but yeah, it's a tough problem.
It's not as relevant for us on Kube as we've migrated towards using the Kube health checks more natively, but Consul definitely does support like custom health checks for outside of Kube things. So yeah, I could see being interested in if this goes anywhere.
I know also that Linkerd has looked at this, to figure out the right way to summarize this one, looked at this not just from the perspective of custom health checks and such, but also from the perspective of looking at the way the Gateway API is talking about routing decisions, and looking at things like, okay, so if you have something that has two backends and one of them is dead, then, you know, we should be able to figure out that one of them is dead and just route to the other one. which I think actually conflicts with a very literal reading of the spec in some ways. So that can get to be a little interesting as well. I think the spec literally says that you're supposed to take 50% of the traffic to the good endpoint and then, 5xx the other 50%, which seems probably like it wasn't intended, but it's the sort of thing that's come up as we've started looking at some of this stuff.
So I think our goal with that spec, and should double check, but I think our goal with that spec is in the world where we're traffic splitting and someone has two services and they've said both should get 50%, and one service has no endpoints available, we should not send 50% of all traffic to the other service. We should 5xx the traffic split endpoints. Whether or not that's correct, but what I want to clarify for sure is that I don't think anyone had the intention that if you have two endpoints behind the same service and one is not healthy, you should just send it to the healthy endpoint for sure. Like that. Yeah. Yes, I think that's not controversial.
Even in the case, and again, I'm obviously looking at this through Linkerd colored glasses right at this moment, right? But even in the case where one of them doesn't have any endpoints, I think there are a lot of situations where it would probably make more sense for Linkerd to just be able to route everything to the one that does have endpoints. And that would be really interesting to talk more about, to understand, where that got into the spec and why and all that. Because, there's that is not a discussion I've had with anybody yet. It's just something that kind of came up as we were going through and reading things over.
Yeah, I get that. And I see there's room for improvement there. I think there are, when we were writing that part of the spec, we had a real focus on this idea that if we were going to fail, we wanted to fail quickly and visibly.
Yeah.
Right. So that if somebody made a change and their config wasn't working, it was obvious. That's where that idea came from. Now, I admit that if, during the course of events, you reach a point where one of your services becomes unavailable, that would be kind of just a really frustrating outcome to have. So.
Yeah. And that's going to happen, of course. So.
Yeah, for sure.
But sorry, I didn't particularly want to derail this with that specific issue too much. I was more just bringing it up in the context of, we have done some reading and some thinking and things there where, some sort of ability to talk about how shall we determine whether these services are healthy? How shall we determine whether a backend is healthy and things like that, right? That has definitely come up, and it's something that is probably going to be interesting to figure out what makes sense in the context of the mesh and how it differs from the context of the Ingress.
Yeah, definitely. And if you ever run into some weird part of the spec that we just haven't thought about for a while, I definitely would recommend and even request that you create an issue just so we can, hey, that thing that made sense a year ago, maybe we should reconsider it.
Yeah, it kind of hadn't quite gotten far enough up the stack for that just yet, but since it came up, I figured I'd bring it up. So yeah, I can go create a discussion or an issue or something like that.
Sounds good. Hey, Keith.
Hi, I'm finally here.
I think that we're about ready to wrap up, unless there's any topics that you wanted to bring up.
No, the health checking one that was just discussed is something interesting to me because it feels like one of those parts of the upstream Gateway API spec that where the desired behavior and the goals are a little bit at odds with how we typically do things in the mesh world. Failing quickly and what was the second word? Obviously. I forget what the second part of that description that you said, Rob. But that's typically not what customers are wanting from their mesh. The transparent proxy piece of of the mesh value proposition is something that a lot of customers reach for, and ideally they don't want to see any failures. Now
it does kind of depend on what the failure is, right? If you
True.
just blatantly misconfigured something, then yeah, failing quickly and transparently and obviously is a great thing. If one of your service endpoints goes away, maybe it's not such a great thing, right? They're two pretty different failure modes or failure situations.
Right. Always appreciate the nuance and nuance there. But yeah, exactly. And for that specific traffic routing scenario, that's something I'm going to think about and maybe bring up next and talk more about next meeting, because I feel like that theme will potentially, be something that pops up multiple times going through the Gateway API spec. I've noticed something like that. Some things like that a couple of times. I'll go back and try to find them. But it might, I don't know, there are things where, ingresses don't typically do things, but meshes are expected to do things from a user experience perspective. And it might be interesting to kind of have I don't even know I'm not proposing anything yet. I'll do some more thinking about it. But yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure.
All right, well, thanks y'all. We have a couple action items. I'll try to sync up with Glenn on the Gateway Mesh draft. Rob's gonna try to schedule some time for folks to meet up at KubeCon EU. And then we'll open a discussion on health checking and failover handling. So yeah.
And if anybody knows the way we schedule stuff on the contributor day, that would be nice to hear about. I think I'm also on the hook to talk a little bit about some of the points of friction that Linkerd ran into next week, so that we can hopefully make sure that Nick is around to heckle, to offer his opinions.
That'd be great.
So yeah.
Is that in the Gamma meeting or is that in the main Gateway API?
That's the Gamma meeting.
Cool. I'll make sure that's on the agenda then.
The main Gateway API meeting, I don't know if I will make next week, but I'm gonna try to be there certainly on the 6th, so we'll see.
Yeah, I was on that note, I was just having a discussion with Shane. The main Gateway API meeting falls on President's Day in the US, which not everyone will be working on. So we're trying to figure out who will be around. We'll probably have some kind of question in Slack just to gauge potential attendance. I know it's not a holiday that everyone gets off even within the US, and not everyone here is in the US to begin with. So yeah. Oh, Family Day. I should know that. Cool.
Family Day sounds like a much nicer holiday than President's Day, actually. I think we should change
It's a
that.
relatively recent one, I think, but yes, it's yeah.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Take care and have a good rest of the day.
Yes, indeed, Dave. Talk to y'all next time.